Hi, good morning everyone. In previous sessions, we discussed about classification of banking and types of banks. In those types of banks, we have this category called scheduled banks. Now, what is a scheduled bank? So, the very basic definition is related to schedule 2 actually. If a bank is there, if a bank is defined on the basis of schedule 2 of or second schedule of Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, then it is a scheduled bank. That is a general basic definition given everywhere. So if it is there in second schedule, that means it has already accepted. So the accepted, if a bank accepted under Schedule 2 of 1934 Act, then it is a scheduled bank. If it is not accepted and it is not placed in Schedule 2, it is a non-scheduled bank. That is a very simple definition. So, if it can be defined on the basis of second schedule of Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, then it is a scheduled bank. But what are the features of a scheduled bank? A scheduled bank has to follow Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, Banking Regulation Act 1949, and whatever the changes, latest changes are there in Banking Regulation Act, because as time is passing from 1947 onwards, there are a number of changes in each and every banking act. And Companies Act 1956. And in Companies Act 1956 also there are number of changes. At present we have, previously it was changed in 2008, then in 2013. So here also we have to consider number of years. So a scheduled bank is that bank which is there in second schedule of Reserve Bank of India Act 1934, and it follows Reserve Bank of India Act 1934. However, if it is there, it follows 1934 only, Banking Regulation Act 1949, and Companies Act 1956. If all these things are satisfied, then it is a scheduled bank. In India, we can see scheduled banks like this. Government scheduled banks, that means public sector scheduled banks, private scheduled banks, foreign scheduled banks. So these kind of scheduled banks we can see in India: public sector scheduled banks, scheduled commercial public sector bank, scheduled commercial private sector bank, scheduled commercial foreign bank, and even these are also scheduled banks. Regional rural banks are also scheduled banks. So that much huge network is there, and after 1965 onwards, one more segment has also been added, that is cooperative structure. Scheduled cooperative banks, scheduled urban cooperative banks, scheduled rural cooperative banks. Because in India, the cooperative structure is of two types: urban cooperative structure and rural cooperative structure. Again, 1947 to 1965, there is no change in cooperative structure. Actually, when compared to this commercial bank structure, cooperative bank structure is very old one, because it has its foundations in 1901 itself. Whatever the cooperative banking structure is there in India, it has started as early as 1901. Please remember this point. The cooperative structure is in India has its roots in 1901. It means that it has started in 1901 itself. So from 1901 to 1965, there is no change in that structure. There is an amendment made in 1965 to add cooperative banks into scheduled structure. So now the cooperative banks are also scheduled banks. That means they are there in second schedule of Reserve Bank of India 1934 Act, or 1934 Act, Reserve Bank of India 1934 Act. So this is all about scheduled bank. Scheduled bank means it is there in second schedule of 1934 RBI Act, or it means that it is defined on the basis of second schedule of RBI Act 1934, and it has to follow these things: 1934 Act, Banking Regulation Act 1949, Companies Act 1956, and as the time changes, these two things are varying. There are amendments made to these two things. Banking Regulation Act has to be modified each and every time, because whenever you are making changes in public sector banks, like merging of banks, consolidation of bank is there, this has to be amended. Whenever a new rule is added, this has to be amended. Similarly, as the time is changing on, as we moving on from more liberal banking structure, this is also being changed. So 1956 1 year, 2008 one more year, 2013 one more year. Likewise, number of changes are there to this also. So basically, at grassroots level, at core level, a scheduled bank has to follow these things. That means a public sector bank has to follow all these things, a private sector bank has to follow all these things, a foreign bank has to follow all these things. Similarly, regional rural banks and cooperative structure also has to follow all these things. And for scheduled banks, there are some facilities, there are some advantages when it comes to banking activities. They'll enjoy some facilities. You can say that some perquisites they'll be having. All those advantages or all those facilities to scheduled banks, I'll be discussing in my next session. In this session, I'm limiting myself to this part only. What is a scheduled banks? What are the acts it has to follow, and what kind of banks we can see under this scheduled banks category? Thank you.